Hello, I'm Frank Fahy. I'm here beside a river which is in Barna near where I live. I come here every day to walk my dog and to contemplate life and its mysteries. And I would like to present to you Putting Shakespeare in the Shade, which is a frivolous enough story, partly fact and partly fiction. I hope you will enjoy it. One of the things I'd ask for you to look out for is the elderly man passing on the wisdom of the ages to his younger son, daughter, nephew, niece. The transferal of information from one generation to the next. It crops up in subtle ways throughout the entire story, even right up to the end. So if you wouldn't mind, keep an eye out for that. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll leave you with the gurgling sounds of the river.
Putting Shakespeare in the Shade. I've spent all my life with books. At one time I was contracted to assist an academic institution with the task of devising reading material for students throughout the European school system. In order to do this, I had to select various pieces of recognized good literature and to devise a series of questions to elicit how the students reacted to and understood the text. US authors. Having an extensive knowledge of worldwide literature, I decided to include some of the greats from the US. Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Robert Frost, Raymond Carver, Philip Roth, John Irvin. UK authors: Chaucer, Shakespeare, Wordsworth, Keats, T.S. Eliot, Philip Larkin. European writers: Cervantes, Guy de Maupassant, Jean-Paul Sartre, Henrik Boll, Franz Kafka, Günter Grass. Irish writers: James Joyce, George Bernard Shaw, Samuel Beckett, Seamus Heaney, Maeve Binchy, Roddy Doyle. An eclectic bunch, I'm sure you will agree. Having made my selections, I double-checked the instructions to find that I was one story short of the required number. I considered starting my trawl again and wading my way through the books of world literature on my shelves. But time was the enemy. I decided to take a shortcut. A few years earlier, I had written a short piece aimed at an audience of young adults. I thought this might fit the bill. The main advantage to the article was that I had already devised a series of exploratory questions, similar in nature to those required for the European project. With little further debate, I included my own piece, thought no more about it, and assumed that no one would notice the cuckoo in the nest, the humble interloper among the world's finest, the minion among the recognized greats. A few weeks later, imagine my surprise when I received a letter from my European employers. They thanked me for a job well done, and they complimented me on my selections. However, they pointed out that other publishers and academics had also been set the same task. Only one selection per person was allowed. In the case of the bundle of literature that I had compiled, they rejected Shakespeare, they rejected Shaw, they rejected Sartre. Hemingway, Heaney and Kafka did not make the cut. In fact, they rejected everything except my own piece. Who is this talented writer? The judges demanded to know. He appears to have struck just the right chord. His musings are deemed to be very appropriate. His questions and explorations are exemplary. In fact, it is the most germane article of the entire collection. Chuffed? I could barely speak. Me, a giant of literature. Maybe not. Maybe I just got lucky and had a nice piece of writing prepared at the right time in the right place. Still, it makes a good after-dinner story. How I put Shakespeare into the shade. And the article that was accepted? I hope you enjoy it. Party piece. I've always been fascinated by rivers. My happiest memories are the summer holidays I spent on my Uncle John's farm. As soon as I arrived, I took off across the headland with my notebook and pen to get to my favourite place. The openness of the farmland, the blue skies, the constantly shining sun, it was always sunny in those days, inspired me to write my first jottings, the poems of my childhood. I had little or no world experience, but nature, in all its summer glory, provided the fodder for creating rhymes. The variety of activities in those farm fields, the opulent shrubs and wildflowers, filled my head and my pen with glowing descriptions about the mystical habitat under the open skies. My favourite place was beside the river. My ears bristled like antennae, tuning into the splosh-splash of water gurgling over stones and the gentler puttering sound of liquid navigating its way over pebbles. Now and again a brown trout sprang into the air, a coiled spring in search of passing insects. It pirouetted in mid-air and tumbled gracefully in flight before belly-flopping with the gentlest of plops back to the darkest nooks and crannies of the riverbed. The everlasting motion of the water busily gurgling and gushing, invigorated me. Even in the very hot summers when the river trickled to a stream, it still revealed its mysteries. On one occasion, a large eel got trapped in a pond on the riverbed. It swam around and around in ever-decreasing circles. I was amazed how a river so deep and so powerful during the rainy season could dry to a rill so quickly. Uncle John rescued the eel after seeing my desperation. He retrieved it in a bucket and set it free further up the river course. One evening, after the farm work was done, the hay saved and the cows milked, Uncle John walked with me to the river. Along the way, he cut down 2 sally rods, produced some horsetail hair from his pocket, and idly created 2 fishing rods without breaking stride. I remember the slush-slosh noise of his feet squelching in his Wellington boots, the sweet smell of tobacco from his pipe, and the deftness of his fingers as he entwined the silken threads into slippery nooses at the top of each rod. The horsehair was black and fine and wiry, pliable as a feather, but stronger than a chain. Uncle John showed me how to slip the noose underneath the belly of the trout, tickle its belly, and lull it to sleep. Then, with a flick of the wrist, snare the trout in the noose, and in the same movement toss it up in the air and onto the river bank. When I wrote my poems about nature, the river featured largely in most of them. My vocabulary was limited. Evaporate was a big word for me. Gurgled and sparkling were overused, and the water was always in constant motion or in torrents. Consider then how my eyes were opened and my vocabulary expanded as I began to take an interest in English literature. Our excellent English teacher changed my world when he introduced me to the magical phrases used by Samuel Coleridge in Kubla Khan. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alph, the sacred river, ran through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. It may have been written in a drug-induced outpouring, but nobody can dispute that the description of the sacred river is a masterpiece of linguistic agility. Many of us can quote the opening lines, but the real descriptive mastery and power is reserved for the sacred river which bursts with ceaseless turmoil seething before meandering with amazing motion until it sinks in tumult to a lifeless ocean. And from this chasm with ceaseless turmoil seething, as if this earth in fast thick pants were breathing, a mighty fountain momently was forced, amid whose swift half-intermitted burst huge fragments vaulted like rebounding hail, or chaffy grain beneath the thresher's flail, and mid these dancing rocks at once and ever it flung up momently the sacred river. 5 miles meandering with amazing motion, through wood and dale the sacred river ran, then reached the caverns measureless to man, and sank in tumult to a lifeless ocean. And mid this tumult Kubla heard from far ancestral voices prophesying war. A better description of a river could not be found. So fascinated was I by this poem that I learned it by heart. To this day I can recite every line. It has served me well as my party piece. People grow up, form opinions, and believe absolutely in certain unalienable truths. They are reluctant to change what they know to be certain. They get set in their ways. I suffered from this obstinacy. The older I got, the more determined I became to dismiss any notion that a better form of words could exist or be invented to describe a river. As far as representations of rustic running water went, Samuel Taylor Coleridge had cornered the market. Children and grandchildren came along into my life. One evening I found myself having to amuse a 12-year-old who suffered the malaise of his generation, an inability to concentrate on anything that wasn't a TV set, a PlayStation, or an electric gadget with moving pictures. Being a literary fossil, I decided that I would encourage the child to develop some awareness of the world of books. Searching the shelves in the kitchen of my daughter's house, I spied a tattered copy of The Wind in the Willows, nestled between Jamie's 15-minute meals and Diet for a Small Planet by Francis Moore Lappé. No doubt all three books were bestsellers, but hardly the stuff of classical literature. The Scottish novelist Kenneth Grahame first published his story of the anthropomorphic riverbank animals in 1908. Mole, rat, toad and badger have entertained children of all ages for more than 100 years. I began to read the story for my reluctant scion. To my amazement, I came across a paragraph in the opening section which made my jaw drop. In an instant, I realized that Kubla Khan's exalted position as the undisputed champion of river descriptions was at an end. The irony was not lost on a priggish book lover like me that Coleridge had been toppled not by a fellow giant of classical literature, but by the vivid pictorial descriptive powers of a children's book author. As my grandchild yawned with disinterest, I read the following. He thought his happiness was complete when, as he meandered aimlessly along, suddenly he stood by the edge of a full-fed river. Never in his life had he seen a river before. This sleek, sinuous, full-bodied animal, chasing and chuckling, gripping things with a gurgle and leaving them with a laugh, to fling itself on fresh playmates that shook themselves free and were caught and held again. All was a shake and a shiver, glints and gleams and sparkles, rustle and swirl, chatter and bubble. The mole was bewitched, entranced, fascinated. By the side of the river he trotted, as one trots when very small, by the side of a man who holds one spellbound by exciting stories, and when tired at last he sat on the bank, while the river still chattered on to him, a babbling procession of the best stories in the world, sent from the heart of the earth to be told at last to the insatiable sea. Now I have 2 party pieces.
boy. Good boy. Ooh. No, try it again. Very good. That is a minion and you have to tickle his tummy. Who are you looking at? Oh, you're looking up at Frank. You're looking up at Frank. Yeah. One more time. What do you think? You're brilliant. I think that's enough now. We're getting demented. Say bye-bye. Bye-bye to the minions. Bye-bye.